Okay, we got this one here is, I call it connector consequences. You know, there's always some issues that we run into. I remember the one Jeep I talked about where they had it worked on. It was like a 93 Cherokee, and it was running really, seemed like it was a no start. And other people had worked on it, and one of the things that had happened was they had checked the spark by putting a spark tester in there, and whoever it was that checked the spark had seen a spark up 1/4 of an inch, which is what the old automotive technicals used to say, and they thought it was good enough, it wouldn't start. So they started fooling around with putting the chem sensor in the distributor does not bring fire, you know, and they replaced that, and they put the distributor back in there a tooth out, and then they also replaced the crank sensor, but it turned out it was a coil. Then I had to put the coil on there. It ran bad enough to where whenever you got the rotor alignment out on one that uses a chem sensor, like one of your old CSF, Chevrolets, or one of the, the spider injection, or the older EEC3 stuff, like the 1980 model Lincoln, that didn't have anything except a distributor to sort out the spark. It had to be set just right, because if it didn't, the spark would jump at the wrong time, it hit the wrong post, and you're driving down the road when the time is really fast at 50 degrees, it winds up doing this, And basically all you had to do is set your rotor alignment and make that happen. One way or another, in this particular one, we got a deal going on, but there was when I was working for the offshore services company down there, there was these helicopter mechanics that were trying to put a skid back on a helicopter. And this guy had sent this guy down there to change the oil in his Kubota tractor that we cut the grass down at the airfield. And he was watching those guys, and they fought, trying to get that skid put back on the helicopter. And he was watching them from a distance. They were just right up on it. And he says, he walked over, he's just a kid, and he says, I think I can help you with this if you'll let me. And they said, oh, well, okay, fine, whatever. We were sick of this, And so what he did was, he said, raise the back of that skid up, put that bolt in, and then raise the front up, and all the holes will line up. And when they did that, all the holes lined up, they put the bolts in there, and they said, do you have an A&P license? He goes, no, I just got common sense. I was watching from a distance, I could see what your problem was. Well, see, a fresh perspective sometimes helps. And occasionally you'll be running into a situation where somebody occasionally my buddy Donnie will call me and he'll say, let me run this by you and see what you think about that. And he'll give me ideas, I'll give him ideas, I'll call him about one occasionally. And so on and so forth. But that deal there was, he comes over at the end of that story. The work order was this 96 Grand Cherokee radio 4x4 4-liter with 87,001 miles. Check engine light was on, both oxygen sensors had been replaced. I'm going to go over here in between all this stuff, and I'm going to turn the air conditioner down to an acceptable level. So I turned it up the other day because it's kind of chilly in here or something too. I got this one heavy set student that comes in the morning and he wears a coat on a day like today. Anyway, sometimes a fresh perspective on a tough problem can be instructive, even if the guy that's offered a perspective is not a rocket scientist. Okay? In that case, that would be me. So I was over here. Until 91, Jeeps did not have a malfunction indicator light. They didn't have a check engine light. They didn't have any of that. The old Chrysler stuff, the older Chrysler stuff, right up all the way up, had a power loss light that would come on. Red light said power loss. And on those you turn the key on 3 times and it would flash codes, that way. And that kind of stuff. 2-digit code in those days. When Chrysler acquired Jeep and started building Jeeps, it didn't take long for the old Bendix brain box. This old bulletproof Bendix brain box here, I saw amazing things that these things would do. I had one of them one time that was missing, skipping, and it had a injector that wasn't clicking. And so I took the injector out and put another one in there, and it ran good to start with, and then it started doing the, no, let me back up. The injector wasn't clicking because there wasn't a signal coming from the engine controller. This was on one of those old, it was on an 88 Jeep Cherokee. And I replaced the engine controller because I had some over here because we had replaced some under warranty, that they didn't want them back. So I just plugged one in and it ran just fine for probably a minute or so. And then it dropped off and quit firing that injector too. Then I measured the resistance of the injector and I found like 3 or 4 ohms when it's supposed to have 16. That one had to have an injector. And I was thinking it probably fried the driver in that module, but it didn't, because the driver in the module were really tough. Okay, so anyway, whenever they got rid of this one here, it was a real pain too, because it was up there behind the gas, or above the gas pedal in the passenger compartment, and it had 3 screws holding it, and it was really you know, knowing where the screws were was important. You buzz those things out of there and putting them back in, it was hard to find the holes. You know, I don't really like having a fool with changing it. It had the GM style connectors. It was really aggravating to unplug because they, you know, a whole bunch of little pins, tight pin fit. This one right here was the one that came out in '91. It was a different one that was, and it was mounted out here on the fender. So in '91, whenever Jeep got Chryslerized, after Chrysler bought Jeep, it wound up being that, and from that time on, Jeeps had a malfunction indicator light like everybody else. Now Jeep did have a maintenance required light before then. It was a strange thing. There was a little mileage, a little time counter thing. It's a little clear box. It had little gears in it. It looked like a clock. And when that thing would get around to a, you know, a certain amount of time had gone by, it would turn on a maintenance required light. And then you'd have to go in there, and you're supposed to go and check and make sure everything was working okay, and replace that box. Well, somebody that knew what they was doing could peel a little sticker off, and there's a little piece of wire in there. You could move it with your screwdriver and reset it until the next 60,000 miles went by. Ford, on some of them, had a inferred mileage sensor, and what it would do is it had a little reference voltage going to it, and it had little circuits in there. Put your phone away, Zane. And it would actually bleed gold molecules off and close up another circuit, and it would close. And when it closed that inferred mileage thing to the engine controller, it would take the change the strategy of the air management and the EGR and all that kind of thing. And Zane still got his phone in his lap. He thinks I'm dumb enough to run into it and put it in his lap. Since the advent of Jeep's 4-liter power plant back in '87, though, the Bendix system had used weird oxygen sensors that operated in a 0 to 5 volt range, with 5 volts indicating a lean exhaust. So on this one right here, lean was up here. We'll use my magnet to point since my laser died. I won't get into the laser. 5 volts was lean, 0 volts was rich. You got that? Wasn't that strange? Weird. Just a really odd thing. Those were titanium oxygen sensors. They were not ceramic zirconia like that. 5 volts indicate lean, 0 volts indicate rich. Well, it's backwards. And this is what they look like. Right here. Pretty much. And then this is the other style oxygen sensor here. It got a 5 volt feed at all times and had the equivalent of an internal thermistor that reacted to the temperature of the exhaust stream. You got me? So basically what you got, a rich exhaust is cool while a lean exhaust is hot, and these sensors weren't quite as reliable as the ceramic zirconia sensors used by most other manufacturers. And it's really fun when you go to take the doggone oxygen sensor out, and this happens on all makes and models. Occasionally you'll go take an oxygen sensor out, and I don't know if it's because somebody had screwed it out to do something else and put it back in there without any of the anti-seize compound on it, but when you go to take it out, the threads come with it.
Ew.
And it's really nasty. And you can't just leave that hole open. So what do? What size are the threads on a contemporary oxygen sensor, one like these right here, you know? You better have a thread tap in your box. I got one in my box. What size threads are they? Anybody know? They're 18 millimeters, same as a dadgum spark plug, the bigger spark plug threads, like on your old V6, straight 6 Fords. It's the same thing, 18 millimeter. So have you an 18 millimeter tap in case your oxygen sensor wipes the threads out, and you're going to go in there and chase them out with that and put it back in. I don't know how many times I've had to do that. Well, you know the oxygen sensors will come with this anti-seize compound right there on the threads, whenever it's needed. Okay, the 96 Jeep OBD2 controller sends 5 volts to the sensor like the old Bendix unit, but for a different reason. It operates in a 0 to 1 volt range that most of us are accustomed to, but when the engine is first started on a late 90s Jeep, if you happen to be looking at a scan tool value, and that's the DRB, that is actually a scan tool shot of the DRB3 emulator. You can buy an emulator and go on there. You're initially going to see the 5 volts. And as the internal heater raises the temperature of the sensor, the voltage drops down to between the 0 to 1 volt range. That's how it knows the oxygen sensor is actually good. As the voltage threshold drops into that range, the PCM closes, and this doesn't take long, just a couple of minutes. It closes the fuel feedback loop and begins its closed loop strategy. Open loop is when it's ignoring the sensor and doing stuff with, using other inputs. And closed loop is whenever it's actually changing fuel based on that. I just put that little thing, I found that online and pirated it. But if the sensor wire has been disconnected or cut somehow, the voltage stays at or near 5 volts and the PCM remains in open loop. It ignores the sensor. Now I will tell you, these sensors fail in a peculiar fashion, and I've talked about this a little bit before. And I've seen them do this whenever I put the, we had the MDS machine over there, and we would put this data recorder on it. And whenever somebody would say, I'll be driving along, and I'd start bucking and jumping and all that kind of stuff, and you'd see that the oxygen sensor had sort of stalled out at about 0.6 of a volt. And so it would start using a fuel trim to try to pull that 0.6 of a volt below, back where it's supposed to be. And it would, as it would deteriorate, it would, catch and release, if you want to call it, or something like that. And if you looked at the fuel trims, it would look like a real ugly sawtooth, and you'd be feeling that because the oxygen sensor failed at 0.6 of a volt. You see one doing that. If you see the oxygen sensor stopping at 0.6 and that fuel trim going crazy on one of these older, Chrysler products, you pop an oxygen sensor on. One day there was one that came in, and we didn't have any books on some of the Chryslers until we got the Jeep franchise. But one came in and it was running rich. And so I remembered something that I was taught at and it doesn't take much to figure this out, that I was used to. The old sensor had a ground that it got through its threads, and it had a single wire, and it had a rubber, had just a single wire unplug, and it had a little bullet, that plugged into it. And I could actually take my finger, and with the black smoking going on because it was reading lean, and I touched it to the battery, kind of like I do this ignition board, and I would tap that oxygen sensor with my other wet finger, and it would start, the black smoke would go away. I'd be putting, and that's the way I knew the oxygen sensor was bad on those. You could also get meter up to it. I don't know how many times I've done that, and you could watch what the oxygen sensor does. Let me ask you this, what if the oxygen sensor is reading lean, but it's running rich? You got the oxygen sensor plugged in, everything's like, it's reading lean, but it's running rich. What's that telling you? That's before you could even measure fuel trim. That means the oxygen sensor is bad. It's trying to correct that. You got me? Add fuel. Okay. Ryan drew this down on the 96 Grand Cherokee. The scan tool is big on verbally defining the codes, and in this case, the 96 Jeep tossed an O2 sensor shorted to voltage code. We pulled up the scan tool PIDs for both the front and rear oxygen sensor. See all that high voltage there that you're seeing there? And low oxygen level and all that, blah blah. But it was basically zero. It hadn't even gone into closed loop yet. When your short-term adaptive was nothing because it wasn't in open loop. Okay, so we used wire colors from the schematic. He had gone through the wire-by-wire check of the harness and found that all the wires were good from the sensor to the PCM. So he checks every one of them, from the sensor to the PCM. He's looking at the wire colors and all that kind of thing. Wasn't long afterwards that I showed up and he called me, had a look. The shorted voltage message wouldn't go away no matter what he do. Even try to substitute powertrain control module. All right, finally it popped the same message on there. All right, so I looked at the connector. I noticed that one of the metal terminals was visible. I could see that it had pushed out here, and that's an actual picture of the connector, but it's not showing you the pushed out terminal because I didn't have the foresight to take a picture of that. Right? Like it had been pushed back, wasn't making contact with its mate in the other part. So I said, look. He says, oh yeah, I've noticed that, and I may need a new connector shell, but whether that wire is shoved in or not, it doesn't make any difference because he had already shoved that wire in to see if it would change anything, and it didn't. So I pulled on the other 3 wires to see how they felt, and they were all solidly connected. What are you thinking? What do you think may be wrong?
Everybody, he's pushing it in where it's, is he making a good connection?
Yeah, he was thinking he was making a good connection because he pushed it in like the rest of them and nothing changed. His code didn't go away.
Probably still got a bad connection.
Yeah. I said, what about the rest of the wires? Are they in the right cavities? He said, well, I checked them according to the pinout in the MDS2, which was, the computer on the box is connected to Chrysler, and you got all your shop manual stuff in it and everything. And they seemed to be in the right place. So we walked over to the Mopar diagnostic system and pulled the pin out. This is time for a funny story. On the back of the Mopar diagnostic system, there was a phone. And in order to call the Chrysler hotline, if you were at a dealer, all you had to do is pick up this phone. And boy, this was a military grade phone with big heavy curly cord and all that stuff. And you could pick it up and it would call the Chrysler hotline as soon as you picked it up. I don't know how I knew you picked it up because there wasn't no switch on there. But anyway, it called the Chrysler hotline and you could talk to them. And you could also upload files to them if you wanted to, I guess, and all that. But anyway, I was going on a trip and I stopped down there. No cell phones in those days. And Donnie's girlfriend, who eventually became his wife, says, how do I get a hold of Donnie? I said, well, I wired the phone up to that machine down there, and so I happen to know the number. And I said, if you'll call that Mopar diagnostic system phone number, it will ring that phone. And he'll answer it. And I said, but the funny thing you could do is tell him that you're with the IRS and you're gonna audit his taxes. And so they laughed about that and I went on my way. Well, Monday I came back, he says, I can't believe what you did to me. It was wrong. I said, what are you talking about? He says, this phone rang last Friday and I picked it up and I heard this strange voice I'd never heard before saying, this is the Internal Revenue Service, and they called me by name and told me I was to audit my taxes. And I says, and my heart goes, and I says, didn't you think it was strange they were calling you on the Mopar diagnostic system? He goes, I'm worried about all that. All I was here when I was going to get a tax audit. Well, anyway, that was a funny joke we played. Anyway, so we went over there and pulled up the pinout. Here's what the sensor connector looked like, and that's what what it looks like on the Mopar screen. I mean, and this is dark green orange automatic shutdown relay, which powers up the heater. Black tan your ground, which for the heater, and then black light blue sensor ground, and black orange is the upstream heated oxygen sensor signal. So those are the ones on that. So this confusion here, it looks like they did a really good job of drawing that, but can you look at that and tell what's right? Isn't that confusing as all get out? I mean, heck, it confused me. I mean, I look at this thing and I'm saying, well, that looks like that probably, I don't know, maybe does this go down there, or I don't know, but let's just, or does this plug in? No, that'd have to go, I'm not sure. But anyway, so as you're looking at that, these connectors right here are easy to take apart. The more terminals they have in them, the more dicey it is to take these suckers apart. If you just got 4 terminals, ain't a big deal. But if it's got a whole bunch of terminals you can take apart, they made some tools. Thomas Betts used to make some tools that you would use to unlatch these terminals, get them out of there. Well, this connector is really easy to disassemble, and that makes it that much more likely to become the victim of an overzealous owner. Because it's really easy for these things to pop out of here and get just like this, See what I'm saying? All right, so assuming the schematic to represent the harness connector and not the oxygen sensor connector, wrong. He peers into the connector, lines the shape codes up with the illustration best he could, checked the wire colors, looked like the wires were inserted the right way, but then we realized the numbers on the back of the oxygen sensor connector were easier to follow, because on the back of the sensor connector there was 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so see the 1, 2, 3, and 4. This is the harness connector that plugs into the oxygen sensor. And you can't hardly see them there. I got another picture that's better later on that you can see in here. But these numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4. We're looking at that. Now, do you see a problem here already?
Yeah,
What do you see?
the colors aren't in the right spot.
Yeah, so you got 1, it's supposed to be a dark green orange. That's dark green orange down there. 2 is supposed to be black tan. All right, so one way or another, this is what you pull up, and this is pretty cool. Chrysler for a long time was really, really, really nice about this. They put these little wires right here. This is your connector, and it actually tells you what color goes to which pin. That's really handy, isn't it? And there's another view of that connector that's, that's not as clear a picture as I wanted to take, but the simple fact is, we were looking at these, and what we were seeing was, if you zoom in on that, this one here was in cavity 1.
Sir, visitor.
Hey, you got it. And this one right here was in cavity 4. That one right there was in cavity 3. See how they weren't lined up right? That one was in cavity 2. So these 2 were transposed and these 2 were transposed. The guy swapped them around. All right, now then, you see these wires, you can see them numbers easier on that one. That is on the other side. That's on the one going to the oxygen sensor, coming from the oxygen sensor. And the ones coming from the oxygen sensor are not typically going to match the colors. But what did I tell you? I've always been telling you guys the 2 wires coming out of the oxygen sensor itself that are the same color are going to be your heater wires typically, right? Sometimes they'll be black, sometimes they'll be brown, sometimes they'll be white. But the 2 that are the same color are going to be heater wires. 4, 6 ohms, something like that. And those heaters burn out. Now if you get a heater, if you get an oxygen sensor heater code and you use your meter and you check them, you'll actually, be able to tell if it's what it is. Also you can check and see if there's power and ground there. But anyway, we took and wrote these and had double whammy on there. We actually said we got 3, we got 4, we got 1, we got 2. We're gonna write the right colors on there and so on and so forth. So we plugged it all in. The DRB reading started and moved into the closed loop range and everything was fine. Nothing was burned up by swapping those around. All right, so I have known a lot of people that were entirely too quick though to ask for help they really shouldn't need. Well, all my life I've seen that. You know, somebody come over there, you know, and like, for example, I'm over here busting my fanny, got to get my head wrapped around an engine control problem, and somebody wants me to come over and take a hose clamp off for them. Please. Or, can you help me find this bolt that I've lost? You know, this kind of thing. You know, I usually do it, but I didn't like it, you know. Give them a hard time, kind of like I did a guy that wanted to borrow the you know, wedge. When we find ourselves choosing that path, though, we can become an irritant to other mechanics. The more you go ask for help from other people, particularly if it's help you don't need, the more they get irritated with you. They just don't like that. Don't be that guy. Test question 1. Get your papers ready. We got time to do this. Technician A says a running problem that occurs only after the repair work is done must be related in some way to the repair work that was done. All right. However, you should give the customer the benefit of the doubt and go after it, make sure, right? Don't just get mad at him and say, I'm trying to blame everything. Technician B says disconnecting the battery will prevent the engine controller damage while performing body repairs that involve electric welding. Like if you don't weld on the body of a car, you know, will disconnecting the battery keep you from burning up the engine controller? How would you prevent burning up the engine controller? Disconnect the daggone engine controller, yeah. So I had that here when we had all of mine here. It was this Dodge. They said, well, we disconnected the battery, but whenever they went and all that current was flowing, if it's grounded somewhere so that it can go through the engine controller, you know, it's adios muchachos for all those little electronic parts that can't handle 220 volts or whatever's going through that thing. And so that one right there, you know, pick your answer on that one. Removing a spark plug wire with the engine running and allowing the spark to jump eliminates a misfire on that cylinder while the spark is stretched. What does this mean? What does this mean? You're stretching the spark and letting the spark jump into the top of the plug and it quits skipping. This is engine performance, guys. We got to know the answers, right? Technician A says a flooded engine won't start because the spark is traveling through the gasoline coating on the tip of the plug instead of jumping across the spark plug gap. Technician B says a diesel engine can be flooded to the point that it won't start.
You can't flood this thing.
You'll find out when we grade the test.
Hold on, wait. I remember you,
Question 4. Technician A says these readings are normal since the ECT reading is reading coolant, the IAT is reading ambient air, and the transmission oil temperature is reading oil. Technician B says the scan tool, if it is an aftermarket brand, should be properly calibrated using the R plus M divided by 2 method. Who's correct? And there's your scan tool reading right there. Well, you better, Mr. That's all I got to say. Hey.
That's right there, just to the C4 part.
Come on in here if you want to.
Really, I bought a bunch of these when I was over at Lowe's. I'm gonna give you a couple packs.
Man, you're a real sweetheart. I can always use real bits. Mr. Waters. All right. Now then, technician retrieves the diagnostic trouble code that indicates an open throttle position sensor circuit. He clears the code and it returns immediately. At this point, he should A, replace the throttle position sensor, B, check the PID data and compare it to real-world data using a voltmeter, C, ohm out the circuits between the PCM and the TP sensor, or D, none of the above. The smartest next step is what I'm looking for. And this is a picture of a TP sensor down here in case you hadn't figured that out. The guy at the parts room in the Ford place used to call it a wigwam indicator. Think about TP sensor, you know, like Indian TP, wigwam, never mind, whatever. You gotta explain it as a lousy joke. Okay. Technician A, while checking for a node star, taking a node star, gets these readings. And this is the readings he got. He got 220 RPM. He's got no injector fault with, right? Technician B sprays some carb cleaner in the throttle body while the engine's spinning, and the engine starts and runs. And stays running. Doesn't die. But when you switch it off and it won't restart without a shot of carburetor spray, what's most likely to be the concern? Write it down, put your answer down.
If the battery's dead, it's not shooting the injectors until the alternator's charging it.
Well, that is not a bad notion, I did not give you that information, but because I'm here and I'm the one that wrote the question and created the scenario, the battery's just fine. But I've been teaching you guys that, and that's good that you remembered that, but on that Ranger, it can sound like it's spinning real good. If it goes below 7 volts, it won't fire the injectors for nothing. However, he sprays the carburetor cleaner in there.
That's what I'm saying, it fired up and the alternator started charging.
Yeah, but when you switch it off, even after the alternator started charging, you try to do it again, you have to spray carburetor again. Critical thinking. You'll get the answer in a
Yeah,
minute.
you got no injector pulse?
None whatsoever, but it does start pulsing the injectors
When you-
after you spray the carburetor in there. And I should have told you that probably. All right, a no start due to city spark plugs can be caused by,
No start due to city spark less than caused by,
you laugh
I
loud?
really, any of this, about any of them.
8, this question and 2 more, right? Technician A says abnormal long-term fuel readings can be caused by leaking seal on the oil filter cap. Technician B says an incorrect mass airflow sensor reading can cause abnormal long fuel trim readings, but that the mass airflow reading may appear to be wrong. What do you think? Long-term fuel means it's what?
Incorrect.
Correcting for a lean condition.
Right, so what you're saying, it could be a bad mass airflow that's not reading right, but it just looks normal.
Yeah. All right, technician A says late valve timing can cause a MAP sensor equipped vehicle to run rich. Technician B says installing an aggressively ground camshaft can cause a MAP sensor equipped vehicle to run rich. Who's correct about that? Of course, I've got timing marks all around here. And technician A says a PCM controlled cooling fan system can be checked with a 50,000 ohm potentiometer. Technician B says some PCM controlled cooling fans won't operate unless the engine is running. Who's correct about that? Well, with that when you were working on running, with the engine running? I mean, work with the engine running, or without, with the engine not running, I mean. Without the engine running, would the fan kick on without the scan tool?
No.
It wouldn't. Okay.
You had a bad fan.
Yeah. Well, you can turn it on, okay. All right, now then, Alan, go back to the first slide. We gotta look through the answers to these real quick. There you go. Hit, go back. Okay. All right, what'd you put on this one here?
DG,
All right. Neither, okay? What'd you put on that one?
D,
Huh?
yeah, D.
Yeah. Nope, that's actually, the spark plug is foul, that should be C. You got a foul, if you had a foul spark plug and you jump the spark, it increases the, yeah, it increases the energy and it makes it start firing.
No, you didn't. You didn't put anything, you just wrote it down, I saw it.
Technician A says a flooded engine won't start because the spark's traveling through the gas, is he right?
Possibly.
And you can flood a diesel. You can flood a diesel, you can get so much fuel in there it won't start and you get white smoke everywhere. All right, technician A says these readings are normal since the ECT is reading coolant, the IAT is reading ambient air, and the transmission oil temperature is reading oil.
I didn't know it was code.
All right, the scan tool, this right here has got nothing to do with scan tools, it's got to do with gasoline. All right there, so, but look, this is what I've been trying to tell you guys. If one of them doesn't agree and it's been sitting, we got a problem here. Got me? Technician receives diagnostic trouble code indicates an open throttle position sensor circuit, clears the code, and it returns immediately. I'm gonna check the PID data and compare it with real world data using a voltmeter. That's the first thing I'm gonna do, before I go throw a part at it. Technician A says, while checking a no start gets these readings. That is a throttle position sensor that's stuck at wide open throttle. That's clear flood.
What did I put?
When it hits 400 RPM, after it starts up, it'll start operating the injectors. See that? So basically, you got a bad TP sensor. Most likely cause of that. All right, he just answered that question, didn't he? No start due to city spark plugs can be caused by any of the above. Technician A says that normal long fuel trim readings, yes, that's true. That incorrect, yes, that's true too, but both those guys are right. Technician A says late valve timing can cause that, that's right. Aggressively ground camshaft can cause a MAP sensor like getting one cammed up, you know. You'll have low engine vacuum, make it run rich. anything that causes low engine vacuum, make it run red. And finally, PCM control cooling fan can be checked with a 50,000 ohm potentiometer, but on some vehicles, you have to have the engine running before you can tell. That's a cool way to do it because you don't have to heat the engine up.
That's both.
Wait, so it's both, right?
Both right.